In a world full of misery, rage, and insomnia, there's a place you can go to just unwind. All you have to do is take a long walk into the mountains, and just past the black house with the secret garden, you'll find a small cabin. Inside that cabin, you'll find the Hole in the Wall Book Club. So now that the dream catcher's hung and the fire started, we invite you to pull up a chair and join the Losers Club as we explore the world of dirty pillows and 10-cent root beers. Hello and welcome back to Hole in the Wall Book Club. I'm Anthony.
This is Alex.
And today we're talking about the second half of the first part of Carrie because chapters were just not good enough for old Stevie King's. Yeah. I hated that. Like when we first started talking about this, it's like, we'll do like 2 to 3 chapters, depending on the length of the book. We get there, it's just like, oh.
Opens with it. First book, it's done in 3 parts.
Yep, 3 parts. I think it's a little epilogue.
Yeah, I think so.
But speaking of segues, jumping into this one, we started out with another one of the Shadows Exploded excerpts.
Yeah.
And just a little note on the excerpts in this section, like, there was a bunch throughout the first half of the first part. It's so frustrating to say. But this one just went crazy with them.
Yeah. it was almost, it dominates it, let's just be honest.
Yeah.
Like, the first half, it juggled, you got mainly story, and then you got some, like, excerpts to tell you stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's at the point where it's just, here's a whole page that's one of the excerpts. We'll give you a page and a half in the story. Here's another whole page and a half, maybe 2 pages of like some of these excerpts are huge.
Right.
You start forgetting that you're going back to a story in a second.
Yeah.
You'll just start reading it and getting lost in its description of TK powers, and then you're like, oh wait, there's a story I'm reading.
Right. We know someone with TK powers.
Yeah.
But yeah, we talked about this a little bit for last time, the first scene in this, because I think you read ahead a bit. And that was delving into Margaret White's background.
Oh, right.
And it's not at all what I expected. I really expected her background to be kind of horrific, and it's just not.
Yeah, you're given the impression that the awfulness spawns from her.
Yeah.
This is not a, my parents were abusive. This is not a, I was raised terribly, or someone did something to me. She seemed to have a fairly simple, regular... I think didn't her parents at some point become Christian? And then that's what led to them being at the church. And
so her dad died. And it gave the date of her dad dying
starts
I believe.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, her dad died when she was a kid, blah, blah, blah. And then her mom starts dating a guy who, I think that's where she gets introduced to the church.
Right.
And it was pretty soon after the dad died. And they make note that Margaret is 30 at this point. So I was like, oh, okay, no, that was not in her childhood. She was fully an adult.
Mm-hmm.
That's not where she got to shine. No traumatic childhood.
Right.
Or the TK-ing. I don't know what's going on with that yet.
Yeah.
But then she basically like flipped out about her mom and the new guy get married. She flips out about them living in sin, even though they're married. She's just decided sex.
She basically adopts a much more radical interpretation of Christianity than her mom ends up picking up. Yeah, you're given a pretty regular, like her parents just seem pretty average, which you'd expect from a average like kind of Protestant thing,
right?
But she goes hook, line, and sinker into it. You get the impression that it just touches something, and she goes far and beyond what even it seems like is at that place. I think she starts. It seems like she just thought everyone around her was doing it wrong, especially when she meets the man,
right?
Her soon to be husband,
Carrie's, yeah, who ends up being
dad.
Carrie's dad.
Yeah,
well, maybe. And I think that's the next thing that happened.
Oh, that was the other part. I don't think it's the very end of it, but they make the point when she does the fleeing. They state that like her mom states that she doesn't understand why her daughter went to whatever, and they mention that they think she might have had a miscarriage, and it would have required her to admit she had sinned that way. So she just hides it,
right?
But it's given to you purely as a guess. It's not a fact.
So she meets Carrie's dad. They dated for what, about a year?
Yeah, it wasn't that long.
The way that sentence, because it was, and their courtship terminated in their marriage, just caught me weird. It was just a weird phrase I wanted to point out. So they get married. She goes off to the hospital. It's all secretive, and there was also the whole like timing of if it was a miscarriage, it had to have been out of wedlock,
right?
And then she writes that letter. And you had mentioned this one last time, and I know you really enjoyed that. her talking about how her and her husband were going to be.
Oh yes, the tail end of that. Yeah, she basically states that she's going to live as Mary and Joseph lived, and virgin from beginning to end.
And you should too, like telling her mom.
Yeah, telling her mom that that's how you're supposed to live, and that sex is it's mentioned slightly earlier when she's badgering Carrie that she describes the act of intimacy as literally a curse on women for even doing it at all. But states that she's going to do it, they should do it, and that in this purity they'll live the proper godly life. And then it tail ends with the end of that same year, Carrie was conceived.
Right. And then from there we cut to our first bit of the actual story, which is in the gym class, or in the locker rooms.
Right.
And it's the coach coming back in and flipping her shit. Oh, I loved this scene. I actually really did. She, at one point, like, slams Chris up against a locker. Okay, so
Chris being she was the big
instigator.
She's the worst of all the girls. Leader.
She's horrible.
Yeah.
Hate her. But yeah, the coach lays down the punishment, which she was pushing for it to be 3 days suspension and revoking all the girls' prom tickets because she wanted to hit them where it hurts.
Exactly. That's exactly what she said. Yeah.
Yeah. And the principal wouldn't let that happen, so it was like a week's detention, and she makes it clear it's going to be detention with her, and they're going to be running hard laps.
Yeah.
She wants to destroy them.
Basically.
Like, she is vengeance at this point. I kind of love that. And it kind of dips into the semi-hypocritical feel throughout, and like Sue has that whole like constant calling herself out for being a hypocrite, and it's almost this like anger because she was kind of terrible at the beginning of it. It's almost like anger with herself and like, I'm gonna slam this kid into a locker.
Yeah, I know. The gym teacher and Sue are like kind of partners in their reaction to having that experience. One because they participated, one because they did nothing about it. And so it's like a weird adult-child dynamic of having the same feeling.
Yeah.
Like, she slams Chris up against the locker. Chris tells her there's no chance, you're not, you're going to be fired. My dad's a lawyer. You're busted. I believe you like the line where the coach says, "I'm not wearing my teacher."
Yes. It's like, I'm obviously not wearing my teacher hat.
Yeah, right.
It like, it's unsaid, but like in my mind, I filled that out with, "I will throw hands, you child."
This is also where it was interesting because I'd been so out of time in reading this book that the concept of, I forget the term for it, but that a school functions as your parent while you're in school, because that actually matters in this scene, because when she's roughing this girl, you'd think in current terms, of course she's gone.
Right.
She's just roughing this kid up, slamming her in a locker. But in this era, you have the schools count as a parent. I forget the term. I believe it's Latin. What they use in the book.
I'll see if I can find it.
But the schools basically count as your parent while you're there. So to a level of physical exertion can be used on a child as punishment. And that kind of makes it make more sense what's going on there.
Yeah, and they don't mention that till I think it's the next scene. Because I was the whole time like, oh, she's gone. She's fired.
I think it's when she's talking to the principal or the other guy.
Yeah, our next scene is going to be the Chris's dad coming into the principal.
Right. So basically the threat, Chris threatens. The teacher, the coach doesn't back down at all. But eventually she steps back and then leaves the room. Chris, I think, throws something across the room in anger, and then King weirdly describes her putting her clothes on a bit, and then I believe it pretty much ends with that. Yeah, you read it.
There's a little bit more in that that I think is important, where basically Chris is like yelling at the other girls, specifically Sue, but it's kind of at everyone, being like, "Why didn't you all walk out? If we had all walked out, Area 51 raid style, she couldn't have stopped us. I won't go see them TK powers." And Sue's basically like, "Yeah, we are terrible. We deserve it." And this is where we start the Sue like inner monologue of hypocritical, because Chris calls her out. She's like, "You threw tampons at her too." And Sue's response was super weak and, "Yeah, but I stopped."
I felt bad about it and you don't.
Right.
It's all in her head, basically. The distinction is purely up in her own head.
Yeah. And that scene was important because it sets up some stuff that's coming later for both of them.
Oh, right.
But yeah, from there we cut, and there's interjections between every single scene, sometimes more than one. and we're just going to kind of talk about most of them as a whole later.
Right. Yeah, we're going to pretty much put the Shadows Exploded basically goes hard on explaining TK. So we're just going to lump that at the end. Because honestly, you could take all the excerpts, put them together, and you get a synopsis of TK, basically.
Yeah. We got a different kind of excerpt in this one, too, which was from, was the book title? My Name is Sue Snell. I keep trying to call her Sue Sneed.
Or is it I Am Sue Snell? I know
my name is Susan Snell.
Yeah, Susan Snell. It's basically, it's slightly annoying, but you're basically given evidence that Sue survives.
It's her autobiography.
Yeah, she writes it, so you're given pretty much guarantee you know Sue's gonna live. I found it kind of bummish, because if you recall from our last episode, we were trying to predict what was gonna happen to her, but it turns out that King very early lets you know that the girl who felt bad lives.
And there is, well, we'll get to that in a bit, but we learn the fate of Tommy.
Yeah.
So we'll get to what that actually is in a bit. So our next scene is the principal.
Yep.
And it starts basically with
Gale.
Yeah, Principal Gale, who is a habitual paper tearer. We need to know this. Through this scene, it's a nail biter. He goes through 7 paper clips. I got that King thought it was very important
to show you his stress, even though he was being bold. But
yeah, but like, this is jumping ahead a bit. But like, at the end of this, he almost the character himself, Gale, almost takes it as a sign of pride, or at least that's how I read it, that he went through 7 paper clips. I'm like, I feel like that's more of a weakness. Whatever. So we get the Chris's dad, the lawyer, coming in.
The threat Chris waved around at the coach.
Right. And yeah, it basically boils down to,
we can't do it justice. It's actually a really cool scene.
Yeah, it's
in
actually
the book.
really good.
We're probably just be describing it very generically. But he comes in. It's the standard secretary calls in. Guy comes in. He sits down, and it's actually almost no nonsense fairly quickly.
Yeah.
They do a little back and forth where they're like, you know why I'm here, kind of nonsense. And they very quickly get to the point where Chris's father goes, I'm going to want you to reinstate her prom ticket. I will keep the suspension. She will miss her 3rd day.
Yeah, he admits she did something wrong.
He admits it, but he's like, her suspension will be there, but you will give her back her prom ticket, and that is key to a young girl's life.
Right.
And I will not sue you up one side and down the other.
And he wants the coach's contract.
And he wants the coach, yeah.
And then I don't know if this was mentioned before, but we find out this is her first year teaching.
Yes. Yeah.
Which I don't remember that, but yeah, little detail there.
And the principal does defend her as, for the most part, having been a very good teacher. Even though this was her first for that, yeah.
And then we get some quoting of cases back and forth.
You know,
This is where we get that introduction. I never found that term.
This is where it just gets good, and we couldn't describe it well enough.
It's really best written part I've got.
They go back and forth about calling up cases that justify the extent of what a school can essentially do to punish a child. And I guess by the end of that point, you kind of meet at an even point. I would say that they kind of thought,
because the principal stands
weird
up
Star Wars reference, but it's essentially when Yoda and Dooku are flinging powers back and forth, and they go, "No, we need a lightsaber fight."
Right.
They quite literally throw cases back and forth and go, "This isn't going to resolve anything. Now let's just like get brutal with each other. I'm going to sue you because of this."
And then at that point, Chris's dad is just like, "I'm suing you. It's happening." And then I was really sad at that point because I was really on the principal's side. I was like, he's kicking ass. And I thought he was going to lose. I thought it was like, okay, it's done. And then he hits back with, well, we're going to sue your daughter on behalf of Carrie.
Because the same thing you're trying to invoke on your daughter's behalf is exactly what your daughter did to Carrie. So it's literally back and forth 100%. And
she's our kid too. We can sue on her behalf.
And the lawyer tries to be clever at the end. You can see him struggling to find a comeback, but you're very firmly given by the end that the principal like completely shut him down. So, and
I just want to take like a step back from this book for a second and just talk about the writing in this scene. This is why I love Stephen King. Like, I give Stephen King a lot of shit, and I love ranting about Stevie King's, but this is why I keep coming back, is you get chunks like this. You're like, damn, that was really, really well written.
It's because it's so simply good.
Mm-hmm.
You're not, when we say it's really good, it's not like we're describing to you like, some part of a Shakespearean play or some nonsense. It's that you can follow along flawlessly no matter how much content was there.
Right.
Like you were able to read that, throwing cases, throwing references, throwing around why I can sue you and you can sue me, but you followed it rapidly.
Right.
You weren't stopping and going, okay, what's that? And that's what makes King's book so good. It's the can give you as much information as possible, but read like the simplest pamphlet on something.
Yeah. So, yeah, from there, that scene kind of... I was left with the feeling that the principal was winning, but it wasn't absolutely certain what Chris's dad was going to do.
Yeah.
Though, in an excerpt, pretty quickly...
I believe immediately, almost, the excerpt. Because I think Chris
it's
herself admits later
the next
in the
scene,
story.
Or it's the scene after that.
I think it's confirmed twice, both in an excerpt and eventually Chris admitting it live in the story. I don't remember where those both are, but yeah, you fairly quickly discover he gives up on the case.
Yeah. And so we're left with...
they do also make a joke at the end when he leaves. Him and the gym teacher say that they, thank goodness, they're paid up on their unemployment insurance.
Right.
Because they didn't know if they had won that little duel.
Yeah, so... Because we get a letter in one of the excerpts in a bit. And it includes a letter that Chris wrote to a friend, basically saying, "Dad gave up." That's
and
where
how
we get
pissed she is because of it.
Yeah. And then from there, I think this is where we actually get our first excerpt from the autobiography, which I don't remember exactly which was which. Those have all kind of run together for me. That was the one where it ends with, hey, I know everyone thinks we're terrible. And I think that's the first feel we got of...
is this the we're kids? Which keeps emphasizing we're kids.
You got to remember, we were kids.
Yeah.
And then we cut into Sue arriving at the soda shop was the next scene there.
Yeah, just to confirm, in case we seem to bounce around too much, Susan, these excerpts from Susan and Sue, the girl... at the earlier part, who I made a point about saying that she would feel really bad about it. These are all the same Susan person.
Yeah. I think she's only been called Sue in the standard, the Now story.
Actually, I think the only time you see the Susan is in those
just
full
in the
name
title.
excerpts.
Yeah. So, yeah, we get into the soda shop.
So she gets there, I believe... Well, first you get a decent description of the place. They describe that basically there used to be a rec center, but it gets shuts down because there was a drug bust there. So the new hot spot for kids is this sort of gas station, food court,
soda jerk
combo.
It's a Pizza Hut, Taco Bell.
Yeah, it's this weird concoction of things you can do all in one place. Not a mall. There's not really shopping. It's just all these weird stuff. But she shows up there, makes a sort of assessment of the place, sees Chris across sitting at a table with two other girls, I believe.
Yeah.
And she immediately has a reaction. Just, Chris, she's terrible. You can see this.
And I'm a little bit terrible, too, because I did it, too. And I'm hypocritical. Remember, I gotta remember that.
That'll be a constant thing. Every time she thinks someone else is bad, she has to remind herself she did the same thing.
Right.
So she goes to the counter. You get a little backstory about the dude behind the counter who sells root beer. I forget the thing he did. I think he had a little mini backstory. It's there and it's gone. It doesn't really mean much.
It didn't stick with me at all.
But she pays a dime for a giant glass of root beer. I knew you were going to get angry on this. Which is ridiculous. But once again, this is one of those moments where I'm thinking now and this book is then.
Right.
And so she grabs that, sits down with Chris, and you see, kind of plopping throughout this moment, you keep seeing her going, "Where's Tommy?" Kind of like, she's there for Tommy.
Yeah, she's there. Tommy has practice.
Yeah,
she's waiting.
She's really waiting there for them. It's only because Chris basically flagged her down. She even goes over there, but she goes down, sits down. A little bit of talking back and forth that eventually.
Yeah, it starts out with Chris being like, "Why didn't you stick up for me?" And it's kind of a repeat, but more intense.
Yeah.
I didn't know why I was here.
I believe Sue even describes it as she hasn't recalled the last time she actually fought with someone. I believe is how she describes it, because it's literally a banter back and forth. Chris keeps basically going, "Why do you defend her? Carrie's trash. What are you doing?" And Sue's basically going, I actually feel bad. I don't actually agree with this. And to be honest, you're kind of just being a trashy person. And then she sits. I believe there's another point where she goes, "Where's Tommy?" She's frantically looking. At this point, towards the end of this argument, I believe Chris's boyfriend walks up because she goes into a thing about why she doesn't know why Chris likes him, as she, in her mind, describes what he looks like.
Right.
It's this leather jacket with these weird little tassels on them. He basically looks like he's good for nothing, essentially.
Yeah.
And
he's King's
very... It's a very common thing King does where he's like, hey, here's a character who is evil through malleability or just complete complacency. Like, they're never the instigator, but there's so often a character's like, hey, you, do this evil thing. Sure, boss, for whatever the reasons.
Right.
And he's that character.
Yeah.
He's the kid, the bully kid in it. And the bully kid in... the one that I have a pet theory that it is just it without horror, where they Stand By Me.
Oh, yeah. There it is.
He's the bully in that.
Yeah.
Those are the same book, by the way. One just as a clown and one as a dead body.
Well,
We'll
get to that.
Both have dead bodies, but one doesn't have a clown.
Right.
Okay, but yeah, that's who he is.
Yeah. And so... yeah, and as you will soon see in the story, his slavery is to his girlfriend. It's not even assumed. He literally gets very explicit that he will do anything she orders him to do. So he gets there. I believe she describes him as sitting down.
I am actually on the page. I want to read this just real quick. Billy, that's his name. Billy said nothing. And this is from a later bit, but whatever. Billy said nothing. But of course, it was not for Freddie Overlock, who was an asshole. It was for Chris Hargenston. Just as everything was for Chris, and had been since the day she swept down from her lofty college course Olympus and made herself vulnerable to him. Come on, King. Do you have to call it that? He would have done murder for her and more. So, yeah, that is exactly what he is.
But I believe he describes very specifically, he sits down massaging Chris's shoulder during this, which seems to irritate Sue as well. They banter, and then essentially, not particularly important, it is the repeat of the locker room. She stands up, deliberately leaves her drink there, and just storms off.
Yeah, it's just locker room plus intensity.
Yeah.
And
much more one-on-one instead of group of girls questioning.
Yeah, and this is once again drilling home. I stopped. Well, you're a hypocrite.
I guess it's almost a reversal, because you could say that Chris appeared alone versus many, but at the this hangout it's reversed, because she has two friends and her boyfriend there, and Sue's alone. She's waiting for Tommy. So it's kind of a flip on the power dynamic.
I think this is where we find out that Chris has not gone to the detentions as well. And she's taken the suspension and isn't allowed to go to prom.
Yeah.
Because I think this is where she starts saying, and it's Carrie's fault. Because I think that's the biggest thing that comes out of this scene, is we know Chris hates Carrie specifically for losing the prom ticket.
Yes, ultimately. Even you're actually given an impression as the story continues that even when you're starting to suspect Chris just is now not liking Sue, you still are given the idea that Chris is actually tolerating Sue still well enough because Sue's not Carrie, essentially.
Right.
Her focus becomes so on Carrie that even other things she could blame don't exist.
And we missed a bit in the scene with Chris's dad that's relevant to Chris, because it was one of my favorite parts that the principal pulled out. I know what you're gonna say. When he was pulling out the whole "we'll sue on Carrie's behalf," and he just pulls out a big old stack of files, being like,
weren't they cards? I think they were like pink index card kind of things. They were weirdly, I remember them saying they were cards and they were a color.
Right.
They basically, I feel like this may be a reference to you need to be old to understand it.
Maybe like a disciplinary action.
Yeah.
Thing.
If you had gone to school around that age, you would have recognized the color. We don't, because we didn't.
He goes back through like, well, here's her being a shithead.
Oh,
here's
no.
her being a shithead.
One of them, literally, she put a firecracker in a girl's shoe and it almost blew two of her toes off.
Yeah.
I mean, you basically discover immediately that Chris isn't just a douche to Carrie. She's just a horrible person.
Specifically to anyone who is
weak or...
there is something like...
lower status or disability.
Every prank that he says is like, here's her being a shitty person to someone who, I don't know if this is the correct term anymore, but has a hair lip. Here's her being shitty. Here's how they're different than her. Bam, bam, bam. And I think that was important because Chris is evil.
No, yeah, straight up. Like this disdain for Carrie is not even like a goofy, I've just chosen to vent all my anger towards one person. You're being given the impression that Carrie makes Chris sick because Chris's viewpoint of reality is insanely classist.
Right.
You are either a real person and function up here, or you're just pond scum and you function down here.
Exactly. So yeah, from there we jump to. Oh, this is our first time seeing Carrie.
Yeah.
And at this point, this was a big chunk. Like, with all these excerpts, I was starting to wonder if we were going to see Carrie again in this part. Like, I was actually thinking, like, oh, do we not see Carrie again until part 2? But we do finally get our Carrie. And she is in her bedroom, just being psychic. It's almost like Dagobah. Like,
yeah.
It's straight up like Luke, lifted shit with his mind. Like, I'm lifting the X-Wing. Except in this case, it's the bed. Like, I got it high. Drop it. Thump. And then, like, hearing her mom downstairs. It's just, like, a weird training/flexing on her mom scene. And I love it.
Yeah. What you kind of see is that her powers essentially just kind of... It's almost as if the second she gave thought to the idea she had powers, they just suddenly opened up to her.
Yep.
Because that's what that scene when she pushes the kid over on the bike, and when you're first introduced to her pondering her own power, that's when she's doing measly things and can't even bend a window. Now suddenly that she's acknowledged herself, she's just, it's child's play almost looking. She's lifting dressers, lifting the bed. Like, once she's acknowledged that she has it, you just see this burst on the field. Because she knows the feeling. I think that's the key.
Yeah.
You see the word flex constantly. And I think what's being emphasized here is that the power is almost like a muscle. And the more you keep working it out, she describes it as exercises. She's exercising her power.
Yeah.
It's literally the more you do it, the stronger it gets. And what's scary is it kind of seems exponential.
Yeah.
It kind of seems like the more she does it, it just keeps getting more powerful.
This is just like a couple days later, and we're seeing her in this scene, she lifts her bed and drops it. Not because she couldn't hold it, because she wants to drop it and scare her mom.
Yeah. There's absolutely those. We've described the parenthesis blop out. There are absolutely these moments where it's just, she does it. Oh, I hope my mom heard that. I hope she's spooked out. It's very amusing.
But we get her thinking back to the last couple days, and like she in her thoughts is like, I think it starts with her lifting a hairbrush, and then she thinks like, a couple days ago it was so hard to hold it, and now it's easy.
Right.
So like it's 3 days later, and she's just like, I got it.
She still hasn't even gone back to school yet, right?
Right.
So this is just her being out of school. She's done this much sitting at home.
Yeah. And that's basically what this scene is. Oh, there is the bit where I don't know if it was in this or in the excerpt near this, but there's a poem that she wrote, and oh no, it's at the end of this scene. She starts talking about like, I don't know where this power comes from.
Towards the end, she makes that comment about she doesn't know if this power comes from the Lord of Light. I believe her term is the Lord of Light or of Darkness. I'm chill for it. And then she proceeds to go on to describe herself. Mom, am I a witch? Am I from this dark place? Do I go through the woods placing? She basically literally goes through
a witch imp?
Yeah, goes through all the cliche witch descriptions, like she'd plague a town or some goofy stuff like that. And she seems to almost be like, what's the word I'm looking for? She's kind of like relishing it.
Yes.
There's the word. Yeah. She's absolutely enjoying that she's embracing herself.
Yeah, she's
like,
very
I'm this
directly,
and this is what I'll do.
I don't know if it comes from... I'm going to interject a bit of my personal theory, which I'll explain more on later. I don't know if it comes from Mr. Grey. I don't know if it comes from Dutters, but I like it. And we will at some point be delving deeply into my theory that Dreamcatcher is the linchpin of the Stephen King universe. But a little taste there.
Oh yeah, no, that'll be interesting when we yeah.
It's all about butt weasels. That's like Stephen King is a genius because of butt weasels.
So
that's basically the scene.
Yeah,
it's a pretty short scene, and it's Carrie being like, I'm awesome, screw my mom, but also I'm scared about going back to school.
It's basically the King bringing her in for a second to let you know about progress and then jumping out.
Right.
You're just being made aware that she's gained powers pretty
I
well.
really actually enjoyed the writing of the scene. I don't know why that description of it as a muscle very viscerally, that really feels good for me. Like, that's one of the best.
It's the thing you can imagine. Like, imagine you see people try to pretend they have that idea when they close their eyes and they squint, or they think they're flexing a brain muscle. That's what's being conveyed, like as if you're actually flexing your brain or something.
I just consistently like any description of her using her powers. I think it's really coolly done. Well done. Good job, Stevie Kings.
I think after this is where we get to is it the Tommy?
Yeah, this opens on
when she and him and Sue are talking.
Yeah, it's Sue and Tommy, because it opens with Tommy being like, "What the hell are you talking about?" Like, why? Because Sue has just asked Tommy to ask Carrie to prom. And I love Tommy. God, I could spend the rest of this time just gushing about Tommy. There is a slim chance that Tommy turns into a big old villain in this book, but I don't think so. And I think I'm willing to throw my hat in the, like, Tommy is too good for this book realm. Also, no, we'll get to that in a sec. Tommy. So Sue basically is like, I feel bad for Carrie. Ask her to prom. Which was weird. And Tommy's just like, that's weird. Like, you're weird for doing this. Why the hell? And then what I especially love is he just goes, why do you think she'd even say yes to me? And at first I thought it was this, like, she's going to think it's a trick. There's no way she'll trust me. And I think there's a bit of that. But then I was reading into this, like, also, like, she has no reason to like me. She doesn't know me. She doesn't like, which I just made him even more of just, too good. Too good for this book. Too good for this world. Tommy is... Just take over for a second. I just need to think about Tommy for a second.
So basically he makes the point, why would she ever say yes?
And Sue's just like, you're hot as shit,
yeah,
Tommy.
She's very direct. You're popular, you're very attractive. I mean, why would she not is the real question from Sue's perspective. And then I forget what are they like, it's actually a little more steps before it gets to the yes no. What is it I mean,
there's some back and forth, and like,
you're essentially given that, they go the back and forth where she's just assuming he's popular and that's what makes it attractive. He's saying, why would she? Because they don't know each other. And it kind of starts to break down to what's really being questioned is, well, what are you really aiming at, Sue?
Yeah.
And eventually this is where you get another instance of Sue going, I'm a terrible hypocrite, blah, 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 blah. She vents again that she feels terrible.
Yeah.
And then, because I think that's actually what Tommy ultimately goes for.
He
just wants her to, he just wants her to say what she's actually trying to pull here.
He makes her such a better person. He just...
And
God
then,
damn it, Tommy.
And then she gets mad because he keeps questioning, at which point he says, I didn't say no. And then...
I just think she will.
Yeah, and then he says he will. And then that entire interaction is wrapped up with him telling her he loves her, and she going, that's the first time he said it, but you don't see her saying anything back.
Yeah. Because Tommy's too goddamn good for Sue. Tommy. Tommy.
What is his last name?
I don't even want to know.
Kind of for the record or something. Because we're actually... We're interested in something, and so...
I know it starts with an R, based on the page I happen to open to.
Sort of, I guess, since this is pure audio, but kind of off sound, we are also keeping track of stuff.
Oh yeah, I can tweet pictures of that.
Yeah, we are absolutely
you
sort of
talk about the big
building the mythology thing. Oh yeah,
I actually want to tell a story about that. When we went out to we bought some whiteboards and some cork boards, and we were standing there in the store, and I believe I said to you, do you think this is big enough for a cork board style, like string and pin style conspiracy board? And I look over and there's just an employee just like, what is happening?
Yeah. But we actually got cork board, dry erase thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're trying to deck out. Our goal is to, alongside going through these stories, because it's been, anything we have read has been so long that it's honestly, we're kind of freshly approaching King to a degree, in a sense.
Yeah.
We've made references of watching and seeing things, but honestly our collective knowledge is kind of weak. So we can...
I've read a couple of his newer stuff in the last 4 or 5 months, but that's about it.
Yeah, and I'm actually more movies half the time than I am any of the books. So, but alongside going through these books and going over them, we are also sort of semi-cataloging.
Right.
Because we want to attempt to actually sort of write out what the King verse is supposed to look like and stuff.
We're going to be theory crafting a crazy amount here.
Exactly, yeah.
So, noted local heartthrob, Tommy Ross. That is his name. That full title there.
Yeah, but I believe it immediately cuts right into Tommy at school.
Yeah, there's, once again, between each of these scenes, I think this is where we start getting long chunks.
Yeah, they get pretty long.
Because from here we get the defamation of Tommy's character, and we actually need to talk about that one right now. Because it starts out with, I believe this is from the Shadow Exploded.
Yeah.
Not from...
Because everything Shadow Exploded writes tends to be where the critical of the college thing comes from.
And it starts with the Shadow Exploded talking about another paper about that focuses on Tommy, basically being like, hey, Tommy asked, Tommy played a role in this, and everyone says that this is what happened. He was trying to be nice, but people were shitty, so there's no way.
Specifically young people. They make an emphasis that there's no way someone this young could have done something for such a genuinely noble reason. All young teenagers are shitlords, essentially.
And it's just such an attack. And then we're immediately followed up with the author of The Shadow Exploded being like, but Tommy, if you had seen Tommy, if you had looked into his beautiful eyes and felt that connection, you would know Tommy could never. But this is where we find out Tommy's dead. And this is where my heart broke.
Yeah.
We find out that Tommy can't speak in his own defense because he died in
as the book decides to call the main Holocaust.
Yes.
So we're also semi-spoiled in that Carrie is not just going to revenge the school. Something really crazier is down across the entire town. We find out that all but I think it was 14 people died. Yeah, something. Yeah, and most people die as a result of it. It might still just
be the school because I think they said it was a death toll was around 200.
Maybe.
But there's this heavy implication that the only people who lived are people who aren't at prom. Because they're like, well, the losers weren't at prom, and the losers would be the ones Tommy would be making fun of if he was actually a jerk. And the ones that survived, the losers, they liked Tommy. So Tommy's great. So after the quick attempt at character assassination, we get, Tommy, local heartthrob, Tommy Ross, is just too pure for this book.
No, I mean, if you want to even go into it, it's not just that he's described as being nice. The author of Shadow Exploded states that he was not just some jockhead, that he actually was a straight A student, that even when his parents would be a little rough with him, he took it as a learning lesson. I mean, the description of this kid is ridiculous, to be completely honest. You're given the example of literally an all-star athlete, all-star academic. He wanted to go play pro sports, but his parents told him he needed to do college first. He's going to get a degree in English first.
No, I think he wanted to do college first.
I thought it was his parents that said it, and then
local heartthrob, Tommy Ross. Definitely has the presence.
Because I thought his reply to being told that was he wanted to do the other, but he understood why he was being told it, so he accepted it.
I guess everyone has a
basically you're given the description of a guy who just was doing everything right, essentially. Yeah. And then, as you'd say.
Yeah, from there we cut into Tommy asking out Carrie.
Exactly, yeah. And it's as awkward as you'd expect, and it's done pretty well to point out how awkward it is. He goes up to Carrie. Carrie just basically kind of, what? Why are you standing there? Yeah. You get a bit of the nerves on Tommy for a second, and then he's pretty straightforward. He's just like, do you want to go to or have you, I think he asks if she has someone, or he says something weird about the prom and her.
Mm-hmm.
And then he goes, do you want to go with me? And Carrie kind of just
straight up like, are you trying to play a trick on me?
Yeah.
What the fuck?
And then they kind of do this little duel where he keeps going, but like, you're not answering my question. Do you want to go with me? And she's like, but you're this, but you're trying to trick me. And then there's a point where it actually points out she mumbles under her breath that he knows isn't an answer, but she goes, of course I'd go with you, of course. But he's like, I can't accept that as an answer because he knew she was mumbling to herself.
Right.
And so he's like, are you going to go with me? And she's like, yes, of course I'm going to go with you. And then he goes, I'll pick you up at 7:35 or something like that. And then they just part ways. But while this is also happening, you're given a bit of, there's a bunch of people staring at them, utterly confused at what's going on.
And local heartthrob, Tommy Ross, doesn't give a shit.
Yeah.
Like, he's a little nervous at the beginning, but I very much got the impression he was more nervous that Carrie would take it very badly than worried about his own.
Yeah, that's true.
To
a degree, yeah.
There was another moment that supports my Carrie's not really ugly thing.
Oh, yeah. He blatantly, I think it's when he just approaches her, he said, you're given constant, it's constantly pointed out that he's taller than her. It's always a looking down, she's looking up. And when he looks down at her, he blatantly goes, wow, I've never actually paid attention to her. Yeah. All the other things that are kind of true that you may say are ugly, she still fundamentally has a pretty face-shaped face. She has a decent body shape. Like, he starts to acknowledge that her hair's nice. She's actually when you look, she's actually not an ugly girl.
Carrie is 100% the kind of ugly you got in like 80s. I can't remember any of the movie names. You know what I mean? Where it's ugly girl makeover and it's just they put her hair down and take off her glasses. That's Carrie.
Yeah.
Like
with some of the acknowledged things Carrie states, like when she said if I just stopped consuming sugar, I wouldn't have these pimples. So there's some hygienic elements that she could fix. But yeah, you start with it kind of actually sort of in retrospect, this just sort of dawned on me. I wonder if it's kind of weird that the book actually kind of starts as if you have Chris's perspective, and then it's slowly made clear to you that you're being freed of Chris's perspective.
I actually had a thing about
because the beginning of the book feels like you're given the same vitriol that Chris has towards her with the way that she's described. But then, like the book very much has this feeling that with each layer, you get like a better description of where people really lie, and then it very quickly isolates Chris and her boyfriend as almost the sole bad guys.
Right.
You start with a mob and you end with that's the villain.
Yeah.
I now feel like it's pretty obvious it's Chris and her boyfriend and their little gang that's really all you're needing to worry about. They're the monsters that are going to cause this to happen, essentially.
Yeah, because and we get the setup for that in our next scene, because I think that's pretty much all that happens there.
Yeah.
Because then our next one is them.
Carrie.
Oh wait, no, it's Carrie at home.
Yeah.
Next, so
this is where Carrie flexes on her mom.
Straight up.
Yeah.
Right. This is like she tells her mom she's going to the dance. Just straight up.
I want to be normal. You're not going to ruin this. I don't want to have your life.
Yeah, she straight up says, I don't like your life.
Yeah.
And then there's this moment where she's like,
I believe she throws something at Carrie's face, like or food or something, right? Like tea. It splashes her in the face. She says it's not so hot that it actually scalded her, but nevertheless shut her up.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, her mom starts shrieking. Yeah, the insane vibrating anger. The same that her mom very much is a. And you're on.
Yep.
It's always the calmest thing ever, and then suddenly she snaps and she's throwing stuff. I believe she comes up and doesn't she? She goes at Carrie, doesn't she?
Yeah. She tries to get Carrie into the closet,
right?
And there's a brief moment where Carrie's like, "Oh shit, mom's gonna, I'm done for blah," and then Carrie just kind of is like, "Wait a fucking second, I can bring the rocks." Like, she does not bring the rocks, but like,
that
she
seems
thinks
to be
about the rocks.
The rocks are always the symbol of this conjuring it back up. But yeah, she starts tossing stuff.
Oh yeah,
just flexing on her mom. She's not yet assaulting her with it, but she's showing her mom that this isn't a winning fight. She could crush her with a table if she wanted to.
Right.
And at this point, her mom, as she's done in every instance in this case, drops to her knees and starts praying. And this pisses off Carrie even more, who tells her to get up, like orders her to stand back up. And she keeps going. I believe at this point she's like kind of throwing crap around her to keep doing this.
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, it keeps trying to intimidate her to stand up without hurting her. And eventually it leads to Carrie just going, you know what? I'm going to the basement. Oh, yeah, we kind of forgot to point that out. The dress she's wanting to make to wear to the prom with Tommy, that stuff's in the basement.
Right.
So that's what explains why she says basement here. She says that she's going to go to the basement, and then she goes into a description that the basement can't be worse than the closet. At least the basement, she can work on the dress or do something, as long as it's not the closet. And she leaves her mom on her knees praying, and then I believe she says that as she goes away and actually hears what her mom's doing, she realizes it's not the Lord's Prayer, but is in fact the prayer for exorcism in Deuteronomy.
Yep. Do you have a copy of now with your new rights books?
That's only the sacraments.
Okay.
I have to get the other 2 volumes.
Close.
This is when it gets back to the principal?
Yeah, there's this real short scene that I think is kind of useless. Because it boils down to the principal and his understudy, which I legit don't know what an understudy... I guess, is that an assistant principal?
I guess the same way a teacher sits in on a teacher?
Principal
style?
I don't know if it was an older terminology or something. I don't know, whatever. But it's the principal and a dude who works in some capacity with the principal. His understudy, whatever that means. And it's basically them discussing that Carrie's going to prom.
Ah, yeah.
And
it's sort of just a cliched point thrown in there to just... so that you get the social impact of Tommy taking Carrie represented in the book. Quite literally, it's them going, Carrie's going, oh yeah, who with? This little turd? He names some random...
Oh yeah, where Stephen King takes an opportunity to invent a random teenager just to degrade them.
Oh yeah.
Oh, is she going with Beak?
He specifically, Beak is described as a man who, when he's wet, weighs 100 pounds, and
you could argue 80 of it was his nose.
Yeah, and it's just like... It's basically the loser of the school is the only person to go Carrie with, and of course, just had to poke fun at him.
Just like... Stevie Kings, you're just making up kids to make fun of. Come on, bro. Come on. Okay, at least it's not as bad as what he does to kids later.
And
his books.
Right, yeah.
You've read
in
the books.
Yeah, you've read it. Of course, then the understudy points out it's Tommy. And if doesn't he like choke on something when that happens?
Straight up what?
Yeah.
Moment.
And then
it's such a weird scene.
He like reacts that way, but I think he very quickly asks some question like why, or does he also end up mystically solving the atonement thing that every person seems to have the power to sense? I wanted to point this out. This is a personal thing I pointed out back when Carrie, when we described that Carrie's hanging out and then she gets called down to supper, the thing we just did. Mm-hmm. There's a moment where she very blatantly tells herself, "I know I was asked out to make Sue feel better."
Right.
And I was like,
yeah, you had an issue.
Yeah, this is similar to that gym teacher going, "Wow, why is every time Carrie freak out, weird things happen?" There's a very weird tone in this book that just pops up just enough to make you notice, but not enough to actually call it a real thing, which is this constant everyone around Carrie kind of knowing that she has something more to her, but going, "Oh, yeah, okay." And it's just like, wait, can you stop? What do you mean? Like, why are you so willing to accept this? But Carrie doing that gives it almost this weird meta feel. It's as if, like, everyone in the story is... I don't know how to describe it. It's almost like there's a mental network over this town, and they're all weirdly connected.
This entire scene was basically them being like, hey, in case you didn't notice, like, these two are... Carrie's going to the prom with Tommy. Oh, let's talk about Chris. In case you didn't catch it in the last section, she's not going to prom. Ugh, she'll probably play a prank. And, yeah.
As I'm saying, this book is very much written out as if it's perpetually spoiling itself. Yeah. I think that's what I'm saying. It's always writing to let you know what's about to happen. And the thing that confuses me is I don't know if this is to mess with us at the end. Because I've watched the movie, but it's already veered off. I don't know if this is King doing something goofy at the end on us. I don't know if the reason why there's so many excerpts through this book paired with it is to mess with our perception. Oh, here's someone saying something after the event. Here's the event live. Where do we see clashes between the two? This book has a very weird feeling of it's messing with your perception, but I'm not sure if King's meaning to do that. That's what's so irritating. I can't tell if he's trying to play with way things look or if this is just a book that's weird. It's just a book that feels weird while you're reading it, because that's what it is. Like, it's a solid book. It is. I can blast through it. The readability's fine. I mean, besides the excerpt story getting out of hand at times.
Yeah.
But it's a very readable book. But every time you're reading it, you're just like, why do I feel like the characters in the world have the same meta knowledge I have? And that's what's really weird about the book. I just wanted to point that out because this is like the third time it's felt weird to me. I don't know if this will keep happening, but it's a really weird feeling as you read the book.
Because this section ends with, one of, I don't remember who says it to who, one of them saying, like, I bet we're going to see some kind of scented, I don't know, some kind of... They mentioned some kind of smelly prank.
Yeah, at the end of the principal scene. Yeah, going back to that.
The other one goes, you might just be psychic.
Yeah, you might just be psychic. What do you know? Like, that's what I mean. This book is foreshadows harder than I've ever seen.
And it's already spoiled it directly. Yeah, it doesn't need to foreshadow.
And yet, I don't even know how to describe it. In a weird way, it's kind of what makes the book fly as a weird tale. Like, if he didn't do this, you might actually like the weird, like, it might seem, how do I describe it? The book might seem actually almost dumb. Because if you strip out those weird quirks, you actually end up with a very generic tale of a high school blop with TK powers. But, like, the interconnectivity makes the story feel meta even as you're reading it.
Right.
So it's cool, But it's also very bizarre because I don't know if he's meaning to do this. So I'm literally experiencing something weird reading the book, and I don't know if it's horse crap or not.
But yeah, so from there, we get...
yes.
The spring ball.
This is where we get to see the Sue and Chris again after the asking Tommy and the hangout.
And, like, not terribly much. Like,
no,
Sue feels like a hypocrite.
You get sort of a panning of the camera, if you will, across everyone working on stuff. This person's drawing some. You get a little bit of a blip of the most artistic kid in school. I forget his name.
Doing a mural.
Yeah, and he's already done. It's amazing. It's really emphasized how good he is at art for a blip there. You get a little you kind of peer over Sue's shoulder a bit. She's just hanging out doing stuff. The story kind of picks up when it cuts to like an office. It's some sort of off room where it's some sort of office, and basically the girl there is in charge of watching over the stuff. It appears to be a place where a lot of the documentation of this events occurred, receipts, blueprints for how it's going to be laid out, what bands are going to be there, and so on. Chris comes in and is like, I need to see the blueprints of this place. And the girl's like, she seems to be willing to, but she's also scared of getting caught herself. But eventually Chris kind of strong arms her and she goes, all right, I'm going to leave the room. You look. If they catch you, I had no idea. And Chris is like, sure, I don't give a crap. Yep. So the girl leaves and Chris...
I am an avenging spirit.
Yeah.
I am nothing.
Chris funnels through the paper and finds the blueprints and starts like laying stuff out. Okay, what could I do here? What could I do here? And then she stumbles across the paper that's the ballot for the king and queen thing. And going through this...
Yeah, we get a couple names, but then the important
Yes,
one.
then we get to Tommy and Susan.
Excuse me. Local heartthrob, Tommy R.
You should watch the Carrie movies just to see who the actor is in that spot, just to see. She gets to Tommy and Susan, and then you see Susan crossed out, and you see Carrie, and brain explodes for Chris.
Oh, yeah.
Like, this is blasphemy. How this is not even allowed in civilization that she could possibly be a queen. So, but at this moment, what is it? I am not unsure. You might actually have to pull this up. There's a specific way she decides. There's a specific train of thought you were made witness to that gives you the hint of what she might be doing. And it's worded very specifically, but there is a bit of hint in what the train of thought she has that kind of suggests what she might be doing. It's pretty explicit by the end of this part when we get to the end, but I'm almost positive she thinks like what happens there. You get the first foreshadowing of what's going to happen.
Get into it.
Because it's one of those weird, like, this jogs this thought kind of process. Basically the aha moment.
Oh, okay. Here it is. After the last pairing, Tommy and Sue. Only Sue, of course. Sorry. After the last pairing, noted heartthrob, Tommy and Sue. Only Sue, of course, had been crossed out, and Carrie's name had been written in. There was a pairing to conjure with. A kind of strange shuffling laughter came over her, and she clapped a hand over her mouth to hold it in. And then it ends with her calling Billy Nolan.
Okay.
The girl comes back in, is like, you shouldn't have seen that. And she just leaves and puts a dime, which she could have spent on a root beer.
Right.
To call Billy Nolan.
Right.
And then from there, we get some more jump-ins about how TK works, which we'll talk about in a bit.
Yeah, we will bundle it all at the end.
And so from there, we jump over to the pig farm.
Well, that's maybe a bit of a leap. At first, we
take this one.
We jump into a car of Billy and his friends, and they're all passing a joint around. I believe 3 joints. They're explicit about it. They're circling around 3 joints.
We don't get any information on whether they puff pass or what their pattern is, but
we don't know their code.
Yeah,
but you're given the standard stoner car thing. It describes the car meticulously, I believe here, but it's like this model, it has this feature, this dent, this color. They go pretty intense with it. There's the classic guy who just giggles at everything. That's a thing throughout this entire part. There's like, someone says something funny, giggles.
I'm gonna be honest,
he's stoner.
I totally forgot about this scene. So I'm glad you're taking it. 100% forgot about it.
But basically, there's a bit of they're heading towards a farm. You're given quite a bit of preface up to this. Basically, the guy who runs the farm is an absolute hard ass. He seems to be decent in every way visually, I believe is how it describes him. Like, you wouldn't assume he was going to be an ass, but he is the kind of guy who goes, I caught you on my property for 3 seconds. You're going to get a buckshot to the ass, which is actually what one of the events that's described. There's a friend. Who was the friend? I believe it was the guy you said before. They had a friend that basically snuck onto the property and into the hen house, and
he got shot in the ass.
The farmer came out and without a hesitant second shot him in the ass. He then got dragged off, had to get all this crap pulled out of his ass, and then was also fined and charged for trespassing and all that. And that was just unfair from these guys' opinions. But
and
these
I
are
think
not
this
the best
actually
of guys.
supports the narrator. Like you said, tends to shift tone based on who we're following. Like even the narration itself, because even the narrator kind of give that tone to it.
Right.
So I think that really helps support that.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. I think that possible effect paired with the sort of in-game meta knowledge, if you will, makes the story feel very much like it's sort of an orchestration you're looking at, not like just simple narrative book form. But they're driving in at that's the general gist of their opinion of the farm. They hate the farmer. People sneak on there all the time. Everyone knows not to because he'll shoot you. Yeah. I believe even they mentioned the farmer has a second hand, a first mate, if you will, who is as quick to shoot you as he is. But they're basically sneaking on the property, and at one point, I believe the passenger seat guy, I can't remember all their friends, he has 3 friends with him. One of them says that, is this really worth going here? Should we, is this joke that great? And I believe that's around the point where they end up pulling up and stopping. Basically, they get there, they turn the lights off, they neutral, and they sort of glide into the driveway. Because, I guess the justification for it explaining about the farmer is that the guy demands...
Kenny and Lou.
Yeah, there we go. Demands that Billy explain...
Well, there's 6 of them in that car.
Is there?
There are 6 of them in that car.
Oh, right. Yeah, they're packed to oblivion. Yeah, they described that. My mistake. Yeah. They are packed to oblivion. That's why they have 3 joints.
Only really talk about...
Yeah, it's literally just... The only real dialogue that matters is essentially basically between the same 2 people, where the guy who keeps doubting the entire process, he's like, is you sure he's not here? Are you sure his second hand's not here? Are you sure someone's not here? And he's like, no, the farmer's missing because he's at a funeral, and I think the funeral is of his mom. Because then the guy makes a joke that if that's his mom's funeral and he's that old, his mom must have been ancient.
Right.
But it's absolutely a funeral.
And that's where he gets him with the old for Freddy. He shot him in the ass, let's do it. And the thing I read earlier was directly after that. But it wasn't for Freddy. It's for Chris. Her butt's so sweet, I'd kill a man for it.
Basically, yeah. Yeah, the rest of the gang is content with doing it for Freddy. He doesn't give a shit about that.
I really think Stephen King's would love Boondock Saints. I think that has to be the only thing it takes for evil to persevere is for good men to do nothing. He's really into the non-motivated and therefore pushed to evil character.
Which is always very weird because King then also doesn't like aggressive good guys. So he creates the environment that by default it ends up producing bad things and then goes, the good guys just kind of watch it. And then maybe in the end win.
Yep.
I mean, if you want to talk about The Stand, literally the end.
Yep. Okay, but back on there. So he riles them up, and they sneak onto the farm.
Yeah. Essentially, it's described they pull out a sledgehammer and they pull out a big old butcher knife. What they're going to do is sneak onto the farm, crush 2 pig skulls. Oh, and Billy pulls out, chilled as hell buckets that are meant to store this blood. They're basically going to slit their throats and get 2 huge buckets of blood.
Yep.
You might see where this is going. It describes the first pig's head being cracked open as if dropping, I believe, a pumpkin from a high building, I believe is how they describe it.
It is suddenly brutal.
You were immediately made aware of just kind of sound when this pig's head gets cracked. Actually, after they do the first one, his friend asks, hey, can we not do the second? I think we have enough blood, but he demands they need a second one. So... bashes the head in, they slit its throat, and they describe it. The blood comes immediately, it's in huge volumes, they gather the blood up, Billy caps them with some sort of sealant thing, and then they throw it in the back of the trunk and essentially peel out. And that's pretty much the end of the part.
Yep. And Stephen King writes violence super well. I vaguely remember that from my long ago reading.
I mean, he writes all. I mean, I think that's the whole point of why people like his horror so much, because he just writes the bad well, which makes it weird. But
yep. Good old Stevie Kings. But yeah, that is part 1.
Yep. I guess that would be the. I do need to point this out actually. The speed with which part 1 got to this point in the story makes me very confused that there are 3 parts. If they are remotely equal to each other in actual size, I'm really curious how the rest of this takes 2 other parts. Is 3 really short?
Part 1 is roughly half of the book.
Oh, okay. Then 2 and 3 could just be 2, but he made it 2 and 3. So we wanted to wrap it up with the TK powers, which are the PK powers themselves. The TK power pieces done by the Shadow Exploded segments, which are actually quite large in the second half. I mean, I don't believe Sue's were too long, to be honest. Weren't they pretty?
She had one that was pretty long. It's the one where she talks about her involvement in getting Tommy involved, and that one's pretty long. It's like 2 pages, so it's a lot longer than the excerpt from the others.
Right.
But it boils down to being like, yeah, people kind of think I was a bad person, but I swear I wasn't. We were kids. I'm a hypocrite. We're kids. You know, that's it. But we got some interesting stuff in the Shadow Exploded stuff.
Yeah, this is the Shadow Exploded previously was what you were getting the vaguest hints. The first, it's actually weird because where we chose to stop splitting part 1 in half actually was the perfect fault line for how Shadow Exploded described what was going on.
Right.
In the first part that we talked about before in the first podcast, you got a lot from Shadow Exploded of the mystery of even TK existing. Was Carrie's case real? Was this a hoax? Are the stories true? Is TK a thing? The University of Duke, I think, is one of the ones. I don't remember the university they keep referencing. Doesn't say it's real. So you're actually sort of in the state of just being convinced TK is real. Now in this half,
Sorry, go ahead.
In this half, we get to just outright what is the nature of TK, and so we get the. He actually lays out a case for how it genetically works. I believe he compares it to hemophilia. Hemophilia, as described in the book, is male only as far as its manifestation. Yeah. It's a recessive gene in a female, but it takes both of it to both a female and a male with it to then produce a son, and they will have hemophilia. This essentially TK powers function this way, but inverted to females.
Right.
Men have the recessive gene and will not have TK powers, but if a recessive gene male and a female with this gene have a daughter, the daughter will have TK powers. And that's just the basic gist that he ends that excerpt by stating that it makes him very interested in whether or not Margaret, Carrie's mother, herself was a dominant and had the powers.
Yeah.
Because Margaret was recessive. She does not appear to have the ability. But clearly she has to have the recessive gene for Carrie to have it. So it means that somehow it's trickled
down. Her dad would have to have it as well.
Exactly. So there's a good chance that her mom could have had it and that she could have actually been a full-blown TK herself.
And there's another excerpt in there that I found super interesting where they talk about everyone focuses on the early manifestations and trying to find evidence that is in Carrie's life. Because there's the one with the rocks falling.
Yeah.
And they're like, but it's dumb and pointless because no one else was in the house but Carrie and her mom.
Right.
And that's when they reference someone else, which I was trying to look for the name. We'll find it to put on our conspiracy board because we want to have a list of anyone confirmed TK.
Right.
But we get a 1 or 2. I can't remember if it was 2 different people. It was at least one. And there was this event and this event and this event. They're very brief, things. And we know these because family members, friends, blah, other people in the house. And it was, I think it was probably written as a way to be like, look how isolated Carrie was.
Mm.
But on a greater scale, it's also like there are other case studies of this.
Exactly.
And the Shadow Exploded gives me this feel that the whole TK thing is well-documented fringe science, so there's a lot of denier kind of deals. So it kind of gives us a good idea as into the greater world outside this book, since all of this is, You got the whole King verse.
You're basically given that
we're
TK
setting our foundation for like the level of knowledge.
You're basically given a sort of TK seems to be treated the same way UFOs are. It's that weird thing where it's kind of seems like enough people might actually back of their mind believe it. You're kind of given that impression. Like it was such widespread news, this event, that I would assume a fair bit of Americans were like,
oh yeah,
maybe,
there's a point at which they compared this event. They say the two most remembered things of this decade was the
assassination of JFK and the main Holocaust. This is where the main Holocaust gets named that. It
kind of implies there might be the TK, but it does not necessarily say the greater public knows it could be something that looks like something else.
Yeah, exactly. So. It does look like it could be something else, but the theory that it could be TK seemed to be public enough that at least it's jogging around in enough people's minds, possibly. Right. So you have that, and then you have what else is the is it basically
it's not that much more. It's kind of
I think
it's a lot of repetition.
Yeah, I think he actually makes the case about it being a female a few more times. I think he's well, okay, yeah. When we mentioned the Tommy course correcting Tommy's description, that's actually a Shadows Exploded thing, I believe.
Right.
Because he researched about Tommy to know this.
Right.
So yeah, I guess with
Heartthrob, Tommy Ross.
Yeah. But it's pretty clear now that
I hope he doesn't end up being a secret villain.
That would be.
Oh,
that's the thing. I don't think he is. The weird thing that's what makes you want to think there's a twist, because all the foreshadowing seems like it serves no purpose except to mess with you. But
I'm gonna be so crushed.
Could the excerpts lie? Because that seems like another level.
I don't know if they would lie, but they could be wrong. Because I mean, it is written from a.
I guess giving you the contrarian, like the fact that he points out people don't believe him and he believes that. I think that's what's weird about this book.
I don't know if the narrator can lie. That is where I can't.
Yeah, exactly.
Figure it
there
out.
You go. Yeah.
Because the narrator, like, I've been trying to find out with everything being excerpts, like, is this something someone's researched? But no, that through the narration, it is
the book, the story without the excerpts.
Yeah,
he is saying what Tommy's doing.
So I'm holding fingers crossed here for local heartthrob Tommy Ross.
It's even better that his name is that, because that's a perfect name to do that.
It's a good one. Yeah. It's a good one. So I mean, do we want to start talking about The Shining yet? Because The Shining versus TK,
let's do this, Leo. Let's dabble in it, because simply because I think we have such a small pool of knowledge.
Okay, I'm going to toss out a theory for why The Shining and TK are different, and then I am going to immediately dismiss it.
Okay.
And that theory is that it is possible local legendsmith Stevie King's had not thought of The Shining. But that seems absurd. So let's just discard that out of hand without any other explanation, like any other discussion. That sound fair?
Yeah, sure.
Cool. Let's just get the absurd theories out of the way. There's no way that this wasn't The Shining because he hadn't thought of The Shining yet. Cool. What are your theories? Like, dip our toes.
Like TKing and Shining at this point?
Yeah.
I think one of my main things was that first off, one of the dead giveaways were that he so explicitly points out TK is female.
Right.
Quantitatively, people who use The Shining seem to be overwhelmingly male. Now, I'm not...
this is purely based on memory. Yeah. I only remember... Not counting The Stand, because I don't remember who did what in The Stand. I know a dude gets shot off the butt with a rubber bullet, and I know someone would have to pay me a lot of money to do this much stuff on The Stand. But, the only person I can remember using The Shining, and I've not read all, and it's been a long time, is the woman in Cujo.
Right. You keep telling me that, right.
Yeah,
sort of call out.
She calls out to someone.
Once again, we're in this weird area where Cujo is after Shining, right?
Yeah. Shining is his third book.
Cujo is like one of those weird, I have no idea stories chronologically. So you have The Shining invented before Cujo, so you see it manifested there. I think this brings into the instance of using that Cujo is maybe the one example of a female using it, and maybe I was just not remembering one. It's very possible. Is that a lot of his shorter? Was Cujo a full blown book?
It was a short book.
Okay, because his shorter stuff always has this weird quality where he seems to let himself loose from his own bindings, if you will, when he establishes things. Like,
it's also an early one, and we're seeing his early stuff is.
Even we're getting to. Even when you get to like just thinking of King short stories, Secret Window, Children of the Corn. Like,
I'm gonna be honest.
There's there's weird illogical kind of stuff in his.
The only short stories I believe I've read of King were written by the venerable Richard Bachman, which is. Just, by the way, there is a collection of short stories by Richard Bachman. I want to do a season where we do a short story per episode.
Yeah, we'll have to involve Richard Bachman.
Yep. Yeah. But I think we're getting ahead of ourselves with this. You want to... I have another question for you.
Yeah.
We were talking about cameos in Stephen King.
Oh, okay.
So let's... I know he likely has a cameo in the actual movie, but in the book, which background character is Stephen King cameo? I've got one in mind. I don't remember their name, but I've got one in mind. I'm curious if it's the same person.
Oh, I would probably say the guy who sold the root beer.
Right there. Yep.
It has to be because it has to absolutely be a situation where it's right on his face, because every time he cameos in a movie, it's literally, I'm the janitor, turn and look right at the camera kind of nonsense, and that is the perfect spot for that guy to exist.
That is exactly what I was picturing when we were talking about that scene.
Because this is how the scene plays out. Camera shows just glass with hand on it, slides it over to girl, camera pans up, it's King. That's how it has to happen.
Stevie King's serving you a root beer for a dime.
Yeah.
Local good guy.
Because King also, whenever he injects himself into the story, he always has to put himself in the commoner position in the story, which makes it weird because it's King, even though it's the commoner position. So it's almost like King playing Nyarlathotep of the old Cthulhu verse. He's just the guy who runs around, shows up where chaos is at. Because obviously, in his books, he's not explicitly plopping himself everywhere, but we're
going to do that for him.
But in the Cineverse, for a lot of his older movies, when he kept plopping himself and stuff, yeah.
You're saying he's the Mothman of the
sort of
Cineverse?
So yeah,
he's the SKCU, the Stephen King Cinematic Universe.
Yeah. Does that even have a name? It might as well have a name at this point because. I mean, was there a movie every year now at this point?
I like the SKCU.
That works.
Skoo. You read the books.
The Schooniverse.
But yeah, I am for the rest of this book going to be picturing that character if he comes back as Stephen King.
Well,
I hope that doesn't lead to tragedy.
And if he doesn't, it's perfect because that's exactly the cameo usually is. Hey, janitor, and you never see the janitor again.
Absolutely,
so that's absolutely perfect.
So I think we should probably wrap this one up. Any last words on it? Any predictions? What's going on? Other than the obvious stuff that's happening.
I guess so basically a meta prediction.
Yep.
I don't think there's going to be any twist anywhere.
Okay.
I actually kind of suspect that this book is going to just blah out and you're just enjoying the experience.
Do you know how Carrie's mom dies? I don't remember. But it's revealed in here she's dead. I don't know if that means she dies during this event.
I think in the movie, if I recall from the movie correctly, I think it is eventually Carrie pushed to the limit and she kills her. Because that's what I'm kind of... My recollection is she kills her mom and heads off to prom. I could be wrong, but I think that's it's sort of like she flexes on her mom, goes to the prom, so she's already exercised, if you will. So when that happens, we're done. Apocalypse time. I could be wrong. I think that's the gist of it.
So yeah,
to be completely honest, how the story's gone so far, it almost feels like the assumption would be Carrie is going to be the one that kills her. I mean,
yep,
that's what it feels like going to happen.
Yeah.
I mean, you keep getting instances of Carrie flexing harder on her and harder on her and harder on her. All you need is that last straw.
So yeah, I think we'll wrap that one up there. If you're reading along, we're going to be doing the first roughly half of part. This is going to be so much easier when there's chapters.
Yeah, once we get out of Carrie.
And then the bigger problem is it's hard to give a page number because we're both reading in ebooks. Formatting. So for me, it's going to be page 215, but we're going to be stopping.
That's Kindle, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we're going to be stopping at the excerpt from the New England AP ticker, 10:46 p.m. It's got a big old, different structure on the page. It's real easy to stand out.
Yeah, that should be easy to spot.
I guess until next time, we've been Stevie Kings, and you read the book.
Hole in the Wall Book Club is a part of the icynewyear Productions Network, and produced and edited by Anthony Sheets. The music in this episode is Supernatural Radio by Kevin MacLeod. There'll be a link to his license and website in the show notes. If you want to get a hold of us, tweet us at icynewyear, or send an email to icynewyear@gmail.com. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to tell a friend, or leave us a review on your podcatcher of choice. Word of mouth and 5-star reviews really help us get out in front of more people, and let us expand and do more things. More information on the show can be found on icynewyear.com. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.